Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday afternoon. Well, Jewish community leaders in Montreal are calling for widespread condemnation of firebombings at two Jewish institutions in that city, saying the incidents are the latest evidence of antisemitism in Montreal. We're talking about the firebombings of a Jewish organization as well as a synagogue. Luckily, there were no major injuries, but as you can imagine, this is very upsetting for the community, for everybody, really. And joining us now to talk a bit more about this is Dan Moskovitz, the senior rabbi at Temple Shalom. Rabbi Moskovitz, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
I know this happened in Montreal, but certainly there is a lot of reaction to this. So what is your response when you hear about these two firebombings in this Canadian city?
My response is utter horror and truthfully a great deal of sadness and some degree of fear. There's a police car sitting out in front of my synagogue, as there has been since October 7th for the past month, and every Jewish institution in the city here in Vancouver, as I'm sure there are across our country, simply so that Jews can go to their houses of worship to pray or to study or to be with their kids in a preschool. We have to be under armed guard because we are Jews. And it is a horrible, horrible thing, and the reality of it is, unfortunately, I think that many in Canada see it as sort of business as usual, and it shouldn't be. It should be absolutely the most horrendous thing that we could imagine, that people of any faith should have to be under armed guard in order to pray or to gather or to study in this country that celebrates freedom and diversity.
Has it changed how people who maybe are going to synagogue or who are praying or gathering, has it changed even how they are dressing or presenting, thinking that if you look a certain way, that could make you a target?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had many in my community come up to me and tell me that they don't feel comfortable wearing a kippah, a yarmulke, a Jewish head covering as they walk, or to put their Jewish star under their shirt if they wear it outwardly, like someone might wear a cross or another religious symbol. Jews have an amulet on the doorpost of their home called a mezuzah. I think anybody who's ever trick-or-treated or gone in the neighborhoods of Vancouver or anywhere has probably seen them. And I've had members of my community ask or even tell me that they're going to take it down because they don't feel safe. Students are not attending synagogues and schools in as larger numbers at times. I think those numbers have come back up, but there have been moments when Hamas and supporters of Hamas have called for days of jihad and rage against the Jewish community, and that has sent a tremor of fear and insecurity across the Jewish community, across the country.
And not to give people who are doing this or people who are responsible for the firebombings, for the attacks in Montreal, more and more attention, but have there been threats? You mentioned that there is a police car, and we've seen the heavier police presence outside of synagogues for the past month. Have there been threats made against your synagogue, or that you know of other Jewish communities or community centers in BC?
I don't want to get into specifics other than to say yes. There have been threats. There have been, both verbal, in-person kinds of things, as well as phone calls and emails for sure, and some more serious, more confrontational that we've reported to the VPD, and the VPD and our political leadership here in the city and the province have been wonderful and incredibly responsive and protective and supportive, as they should, not just the Jewish community, but of any community that feels itself to be vulnerable or threatened at this time.
There was there was a gathering, and I know you took part in the gathering, and people coming together to support the Jewish community, to support Israel. How important is it to have those gatherings and to see the numbers that show up?
It's very important, not just for the Jewish community, and we have been really gathering with each other at every moment for the last 30-plus days since October 7th. Of course, we gathered before that for joy and celebration, and now we've gathered in grief and in sorrow and tremendous worry over the 240 or so hostages that are still being held, and grieving the loss of life, not only in the Jewish community, but the loss of life, the innocence on both sides at the hand of Hamas. But what has been most energizing, what has been most meaningful, is not just the Jewish community coming out in support, but the non-Jewish community that have come out to stand with us against this kind of atrocity and hatred and violence of targeting of people simply because they are Jewish, simply because they are Israeli. And the more and more people that come out to stand with us, because many have stood out in the streets against Israel and in favor of Hamas and the atrocities that were perpetrated against the Jewish people on October 7th. And so the more that come out to stand with us, we don't feel quite as alone and isolated. We say never again is happening right now. And what we mean by that, and what I mean by that, is not the 6 million dead of the Holocaust. That was the outcome. That was the end result. But it began long before that with silence and indifference. Elie Wiesel said the only thing that's necessary in order for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And so those that sit on the sidelines or those that are indifferent to what is happening, you are allowing this evil and this hatred and this terrorism to persist and prevail. And if it starts with the Jews, it never ends with us. It will continue to others. And so we have to call it out. We have to stand together against it.
Well, and isn't that what we're seeing as well when you talk about history and also starting with denial and with at the time people saying, well, what are you talking about? That's not happening. That's not the case. And we're hearing that again now. Just on Monday, some journalists went to the Israeli consulate and they were shown some very graphic video and wrote about it very carefully and wrote about it in a way saying, look, this was released from Israeli forces who got this video. And even some of the response to that has been people saying, well, that's not real. We don't believe it. So how do you counter that?
It is so upsetting and disappointing. These are largely footage that was filmed by Hamas. They put it up on their own social media. They glorified in the death and the destruction and the rape and the murder that they committed. These aren't doctored videos. This isn't AI. This is their own, GoPros on their helmets as they, massacred people at music festivals and in villages and homes. Where is the wisdom of humanity? We've managed to survive as human beings on this planet because we ultimately were smart, right? We knew to keep our hand away from fire. We knew not to run out into traffic. We knew what was up and what was down, and we seem to check our sense of reason and rationality when it comes to the Jewish community in particular, perhaps, but when it comes to these conspiracy theories, we'll believe what anybody says on the internet. We won't believe facts and science and data. This happened. There's people that say 9/11 didn't happen. We know that it happened. We know people that died there. I know people that died in Israel. It happened. I can't begin to understand the decline in morality and wisdom and intellect that would lead somebody to think that something that they saw with their own eyes didn't actually happen.
Many of the leaders in this country, politicians, and many around the world are condemning these acts of violence specifically against the Jewish community, but also calling for the humanitarian pause, getting aid to people who are still in the region, who are still there and who are out of food, out of fuel. Do you think that is helpful, or is that something that is supported as far as not calling for a ceasefire, but calling for that humanitarian pause?
The most humanitarian thing that we could do is to end Hamas's rule over the Gazan people and their rocket fire and their terrorist attacks over the Israeli people. The most humanitarian thing we could do is remove Hamas from the equation. They are not only holding 240 Israelis hostage, they're holding the entire population of Gaza hostage. So if a humanitarian pause allows us to get those people in Gaza who are in harm's way because Hamas is keeping them in harm's way or because they don't have the ability to move out of their place where they are to get to relative safety in the southern part of Gaza, absolutely. But they clearly have enough fuel in Gaza to launch rockets. They've launched 9,500 rockets just this past week. So I don't support bringing fuel in there, certainly to support generators, but it would have to be of hospitals, but it would have to be well supervised. And we've seen that even with the best of intentions, when the international community brings relief supplies into Gaza, as they have done for the last 17 years, Hamas takes those and weaponizes them into building bunkers, into bombs, into rockets. the best thing that we can do is to defeat Hamas, to free Gaza, to free the Palestinians from Hamas, as well as to free the Jewish people and the Israelis from their reign of terror.
And Rabbi Moskovitz, one other question, kind of going back to what we've seen in Montreal, the firebombings of two Jewish institutions, the high alert, as you mentioned, with police stationed outside of synagogues and other areas. I don't know if it's too soon to be thinking about this, although I'm sure people are, in that I think we're only about a month away, is it, from Hanukkah? How does that go ahead while this is still happening?
Well, this is the nature of our people, right? We've been, the Jewish people have been around for 3,500 years. We have celebrated joyous occasions, weddings and bar mitzvahs, even in the camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. Hanukkah is a holiday about bringing light in the midst of darkness. Probably at no other time in my lifetime has the light of Hanukkah, a light that celebrates religious freedom and pluralism, been more necessary, not just for Jews, but for the entire world. So not only will we be lighting our Hanukkot, our menorahs, in our synagogues and our Jewish homes, but I would hope that those that support this value of inclusion, of pluralism, of religious freedom, will light lights either in their own festivals or to join the Jewish community in bringing light to the world at the time of Hanukkah so that we can eradicate the darkness that is enveloping all of us, the darkness of hatred and of terrorism, and truly now, honestly, the darkness of anti-Semitism and indifference to anti-Semitism.
Rabbi Moskovitz, we'll leave it there for today, but thank you so much for coming back on the show. I appreciate your time.
Jill, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Jill Bennet Show podcast. Can't wait for the latest episode to drop? Tune in to the Jill Bennet Show live from noon till 3 on 980 CKNW. Have a question or comment? Send me an email, jill@cknw.com. Thanks again for listening.